Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum. So we're now inside of 5 months until the presidential election, and we're starting to see both President Biden and former President Trump really ramp it up, hitting the ground running on the campaign trail, with both of them really packing their schedules. You know, public appearances across the country. We're starting to see some pretty strong attack ads coming out. So that's how you know you're in the heat of the season as well. So with just almost under a week till the first presidential debate, which is June 27th, we are also really and highly anticipating that. So I'm really glad to be joined today by the host of the Guy Benson Show, Guy Benson, to talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the ground before we dive into the big debate. Hi, Guy.
Hey, Martha.
So nice to have you with me. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course.
You know, we all get really ramped up in anticipation of these big events. And I do think this debate is going to be a very significant moment, right? I'm not sure everybody is tuned in to the debate idea yet. It's going to be the end of June, which is very early for a presidential debate. So what are your thoughts on all of that right now?
Well, it is kind of bizarre, right, that these two men are not technically the nominees of their parties yet.
Right.
That's going to happen in the weeks and months to come after the first general election debate in June. And I've been at this for a while now, and I was looking into it. This is wildly early in recent memory. I mean, these are almost always September, October dates. We have no date, at least announced that I've seen, for the VPs. So there's a lot of open questions here. One thing that I saw, and I'm someone who really tries to stay away from like conspiracy theories and people coming up with crazy ideas, but it doesn't strike me as overly crazy that the Biden campaign, which basically got to set the tone for these debates, because Trump was saying anytime, anywhere. So in doing that, kind of a little bit of bravado by Trump, trying to make sure that Biden kind of had to debate or pressure him into it. But in doing so, he gave really all of the leverage to Joe Biden, because Biden and his team could then say, okay, anytime, anywhere, here's where, here's how, here's what we're going to do. And
here are the moderators.
Trump basically, right here are the networks that we're going to choose. Mm-hmm. So the Biden team has taken advantage of that fully. Trump really had no choice but to then say yes, because of the way he'd been sort of posturing on all of this thing. And when this first got announced, the date in late June, I was like, that is bizarre. They're not the nominees yet. And there were folks saying, well, could this be one final break glass event for the Democrats where they said, let's do it beforehand. So if it really goes disastrously, we can at least have some time to make a change before the convention. I would not bet on that scenario. I'm not 100% convinced that that's true, but it seems plausible enough to me. And you talk to Democrats in D.C. and elsewhere, there is an enormous amount of consternation and anxiety, high anxiety leading up to next week. And I think there should be some on the Republican side. I think there's overconfidence on the Republican side, but the Democrats, they are white knuckling this thing.
So let's talk about something you just mentioned, which is what you called overconfidence on the Republican side. And this is something that I hear from a number of people that I talk to. You look at the swing state polls, you look at what's going on out there. The Trump team seems, and Trump supporters seem very confident. Why do you think that that's too confident?
Well, two answers to that. One having to do specifically with debates, and then the other having to do more generally in the election. On the debate front, Trump is not a very good debater. He is good in Republican primary debates. He knows what that audience likes. He commands that stage. He's got a big base rooting for him. Often when he's done it, because he didn't do it this cycle, right? There's a lot of people on stage. He gets to sort of throw his barbs out to various folks. When it comes to general election debates, we've seen him do 5. I would not say that he won any of those 5. He did better in some than others, but I think he absolutely cooked his reelection in debate 1 with Chris Wallace in 2020. He was out of control. He was talking constantly, interrupting.
Most likely had COVID.
Yep. Raging.
Probably, a fever. He came in hot that night. I was in the room and it was like, what is the energy in here? It's weird.
Yes.
It was weird from the get-go.
Yep. So I think that there is overconfidence in Trump's general ability to stay focused I think voters are very receptive to many arguments Trump very well might make in these debates. But if Trump can get sidetracked and the media folks running the debate want to drag the whole thing down January 6th and these difficult areas where he gets hot and bothered and things start to ping in his brain, then you get pivoting away from the core messages of his campaign. Does he have the structure in his brain not to take that bait? I don't know. We'll see. The other thing is, Joe Biden is a bad debater as well. He's not a good debater. And he obviously, I think, is on the decline in various ways, sadly, but I think it's undeniable when you look at it. On the other hand, as we've also seen at other big events, State of the Union, et cetera, Republicans, they lead up to these events talking like Biden is going to fall flat on his face as soon as he walks from backstage and then drool on himself.
Like State of the Union. Oh, well, can he even make it through 45 minutes of standing and talking? He'll probably just collapse.
Exactly.
No,
into gibberish.
Exactly.
And there'll be drool running down his face. And, then he'll have an accident. And it's like, if that's the bar you're setting for him, he will exceed it. And that's to his advantage. So I think it's ridiculous for Republicans to do that. The bar should be for the president of the United States, for whom 80% of the country thinks he's not capable of doing the job effectively for the next 4 years. The bar should be convincing that 80% that they are wrong in a strong way. That should be the bar. I don't think he can meet that bar. But when you put the bar on the ground, it's a different story, expectations wise. Very quickly, the second part, overconfidence in the election. I think, based on the data, Trump is the favorite right now to win. 4+ months to go, as you pointed out, a long way to go. All sorts of things can change, although many things haven't changed, right? You had a criminal conviction and the polls were unchanged. He went up in a few of them, right? So I understand the confidence there. There's something to be said for it. I do think he's the slight favorite, at least for now, but something I've been obsessing over. We talked about it on my show this week. I wrote about it at townhall.com. New York Times did a really good analysis, Nate Cohn, talking about how the most engaged voters, the people who are absolutely guaranteed to vote, Biden has a 5-point lead with them.
Right.
Trump has a 14-point lead among people who haven't voted at all in the last 2 elections. So Trump is going to rely on an awful lot of people who are not reliable voters to put him over the top. If it's a low turnout election and a lot of people are just sort of disgusted by the whole thing and many people just decide to sit at home, the most determined people who will always vote give Biden an advantage. Trump and the Republicans need to identify and turn out these marginal, unreliable voters, register a bunch of voters. Trump has a huge lead among unregistered eligible voters, like 20, 30 points. But those people can't vote right now. Do the Republicans have the wherewithal and the professionalism to go find those people and get them registered? I don't know. So I think that there's a clear path to Trump victory, but there are some strategic advantages that are built in for the Democrats right now, including a massive base that treats voting and voting by mail almost like a religious right.
Absolutely. The Untold Story continues right after this. I mean, Democrats out-organize Republicans all the time.
Yes.
And we could have had a lot of the conversation that we're having in the midterms in 2022. Mm-hmm. Everyone I spoke to said, oh, well, for all of these reasons, the border, crime, this, there's going to be a huge Republican majority in the House. And it didn't happen. We were talking 20, 24 seats, something in that ballpark. And now we're down to I think +1. So, when you look at that situation and you think about the reality of it and organization, I interviewed Teslin Figaro yesterday, and she used to work for Bernie Sanders. And she said, I'm an independent, I really am not in anybody's camp right now. But she said, I will tell Democrats this, they need to get out there and start opening their checkbooks and basically paying people in nonprofit organizations. I said, who pay who? She's like, they need to get on the stick. They need to get out there and beat the bushes and write checks in the places where they need voter turnout.
Yep.
It's like, to who? Basically, she was saying, nonprofits, groups that get out the vote, you better show up and start giving them the money that they need. Now, I
to run their ballot operations.
Exactly. And I think it's, Democrats know how to do it. I'm not sure Republicans do, especially when you look at the sort of places where that get out the vote operations needs to happen, which is in rural areas and among some minority groups as well. Whether or not they can pull that off, I think is a huge question.
Totally, because if the election is just a popularity contest or an unpopularity contest in this case, and sort of a referendum on Biden and a sense of like where we are as a country, like an overall sentiment check of the country on policy and everything else, I think Trump would win. But elections are who actually shows up and turns in a ballot, right, one way or another. And the Democrats have a systemic advantage on that front that the Republicans will have to overwhelm with all these other elements that are in their favor. Michael
Whatley and Laura Trump at the RNC claim that they are ramping up that operation in a very serious way. Whether or not, if they can pull that off and get people on their side out early and voting, that will be a huge story. If they fix what has been broken for Republicans, that's going to be a very big story. I want to ask you, there's a new Biden ad out, which is the first one that we've really seen that goes after Trump as a convicted felon. And basically the line is, do you want a convicted felon who only cares about himself, or do you want someone who cares about you and your family? In this case, in this ad, Joe Biden. I wonder how Biden is going to use the convicted felon issue. How many times does he bring it up during the debate? What does Trump do in reaction to that? That's something that he would need to be preparing for. I understand that Marco Rubio and a couple of others are doing some debate prep with him, although they say, he doesn't really do debate prep, but they're having some conversations about this. How do you think that goes down on June 27th?
Great question, because all it takes is a question or two from the moderators or a prod or two from Joe Biden about January 6th, the 2020 election, Alvin Bragg in the case in New York. Trump could go deep down the rabbit hole with all of his grievances, some of which I think are completely legitimate grievances, and utterly distract from the messages that actually would win him the election, which is, are you better off today than you were 5 years ago before the pandemic when I was president? If that's the question of the election, Trump wins. If people tune in for the first time in a debate, like morbid curiosity, here we go again, why is this happening in June? And Trump is going on and on about how he really won in 2020. And oh, by the way,
it's all about me. And
Alvin Bragg and then the judge and all this stuff. And I think on the Bragg case in New York, it's a disgrace. It's a travesty of justice. They need to figure out, I think, a very simple, clean way for him to communicate that and move on. That takes preparation and that takes strategy. And if his thing is like, I just shoot from the hip and I don't really prepare. Okay, how's that gone for you the last 5 times you did these things? He might think they went well. Clearly in 2020, voters came to a different decision, a different conclusion. And if the goal of the moderators and or the opposition candidate is to throw Trump into a realm where voters are going to be like, oh yeah, that's why we're tired of this guy. It's an easy trap to see. It's like, I'm calling it right now. They're going to try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does he respond? He should have clean, pithy, understandable points on those and then pivot back to your
Absolutely.
stuff. And we'll see if he can do that.
We will see if he can do it. And, I think one of his most effective answers on the question of revenge and retribution is, my revenge is going to be success for the American people and making America great again. If he stays on that line, if he shuts down discussion about, look, yeah, but you're a convicted felon. How can you possibly run the country? And he sort of in quick succession says something along the lines of, that case is on appeal. I'm extremely confident it will be overturned. I don't think it should have ever been brought before the courts. Yes, it's something I have to deal with, but that's on me. That's my time. I don't want to waste the people's time tonight talking about that because I know they have such bigger concerns. And
which I addressed successfully last time I was president.
So
he could also say something like he can't just purely take the high road. It's just not who he is. But he could say something like, it's on appeal. We're going to absolutely win on appeal. All the experts say we're going to. This was a politicized case from the beginning. The judge donated to my opponent.
100%.
To give you a sense of how
fair game.
He said, and by the way, my polling has gone up so the American people understand what that was in New York.
And they know what it's like. I'm always, you're just putting hats on of these campaigns. But if, some of you know what it's like to be unjustly accused as well. It is not a good feeling, right? Something along those lines. Because I do think that that's one of the reasons that he has risen in the polls, because many people feel like the government's out to get them in one way or the other. Whether it's, speeding tickets or taxes or whatever it is. I think that is something that has actually weirdly helped him in the course of all of this. If you were advising him, would you tell him to bring up Hunter's conviction or leave it, or don't mention it? Don't be the person who brings it up, because they're not apples and apples.
They are definitely not apples to apples. That's a tough one, because you would say, well, maybe the moderators will ask about it, because you can't count on that. You never know. If he wants to maybe muddy the waters, like, oh, well, they convicted me of this nonsense thing, but a real conviction in federal court was his son, but I think it's the wrong move.
I think it's a losing way to go. I would not count on the CNN moderators to voluntarily bring up Hunter Biden. I think they're going to feel like it has no place here. It doesn't matter to the American people. I can't imagine they're going to bring it up. So I think if it comes up at all, it comes up from the Trump folks. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to approach it.
It's a minefield for Biden, but it's a minefield for Trump.
Indeed.
Next Thursday.
So one last thought, if I may, and I know we're going to move on in a second, but the black vote is very interesting to watch. So Biden's support among black voters in the recent polling. Now, keep in mind, in 2020, he won the black vote by 80 points, with 80 points. And now he has 37% support. Harry Enton over at CNN called it the biggest decline he's ever seen in polling. I mean, it's astonishing.
I think he said my mind is blown or something.
Yeah, we've been covering presidential elections for a long time, me longer than you, but I have never seen a polling move like the one we've seen with black voters and also Hispanic voters, hugely significant. Now, it is a trend in Republicans picking up, increasing their percentage of black vote that has been happening if you go all the way back to George W. Bush. Tiny. We're talking teeny moves over the course of time, right? Just a very sand going through an hourglass, just teeny. But that has added up, and Trump has accelerated it dramatically. What do you think happens with that? Do you think that's real? Or do you think, I don't don't know. People say, oh, everything sort of straightens itself out right before the election, but I don't know how you straighten out 40 points.
I'm not an expert on the black vote. I'm looking at the numbers that you are as well. I think what has to worry the Democrats is, let's say I think Trump will do better than any Republican in recent memory among black voters. A lot better? I don't know. But even if he's marginally better, 4, 5, 6 points, a lot of it's driven by black men specifically. Let's say he improves noticeably, but not massively. And let's say Biden regains a good amount of the ground he seems to have lost. At the very end, Democrats come home and a lot of black voters say, you know what, I'm going to stick with the Democrats after all. It takes just a marginal move in Atlanta, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Philly. That's in those four states. That could be it right there.
The election's decided by 100,000 voters in 6 states, essentially.
And it's who.
And if that turns into 2 or 3 or 4 or 5,000 here and there.
And if a bunch of the black voters who are telling pollsters now, I'm not with Biden, may not be with Trump, I'm not with Biden, a lot of those people might sit at home. And that's potentially devastating for Biden's reelection. Absolutely. And for Democrats down ticket too.
Guy, thank you.
My pleasure.
Talk to you for hours. I hope we can do this again during the months to come as we roll into the election cycle here at the end of June. So thank you so much, Guy Benson, host of The Guy Benson Show. Great to have you with me.
So much fun.
That is the untold story for today. Join us next time. I'm Martha McCallum.
You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.